And good morning, everyone. Thanks for making on this week's podcast during Cybersecurity Awareness Month. My name is John Gormley, marketing coordinator for Coeus Consulting based in Phoenix, Arizona. We are blessed today by having the authority in cyber insurance, among other things, Michael Seacrest. Michael, good morning. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, no, I'm glad you're here. And we are going to be tapping it hard today in a very, very big way about getting into the hard truth of cyber insurance. Those of us that have talked about it for several years have said, yes, you have to have cyber insurance. Yes, you need to cover ransomware. But there's also another side of it saying, well, just because you have coverage does not mean we're going to cover you. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So we're going to take some time and dive into that today, people. So thank you for making time on your very busy schedule to make on this week's podcast during Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Now, first thing, obviously, we talked about as a kickoff is cyber insurance is not a blank check. And I think, Michael, you would agree that, that a lot of people think that, you've got a policy, just like you get homeowners insurance or car policy. There's a cyber insurance policy that's out there, but you get one really good ransomware attack. You can not only burn through your entire policy, but there's no guarantee that it's going to get covered. Is that still true today?
Yeah, still, very accurate. The policies. And I'm glad that you mentioned some of those homeowners, the auto, that it's all very unregulated, John. That, the homeowners, depending on carrier to carrier, the policies are pretty much going to be the same. Coverage A is your dwelling, B is kind of your other structures, C is your contents. The same carrier to carrier. The thing that only really changes is your premium. When it comes to cyber, it's the complete opposite. That if you could be paying $10,000 a year and say, oh, I have a great cyber policy, I pay so much for it. But then somebody down the street has a $5,000 policy that covers twice as much as what yours does. So you really got to be careful and look at these policies.
Yes. And I think one of the really important things to understand, and again, as mentioned earlier, us here at Coeus Consulting, again, we're involved in a lot of things in cybersecurity, compliance, managed IT, and cloud. But today, during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we're going to donate ourselves very big on cyber insurance today. And of course, Michael's very handsome, and we're very thankful to be here. By the way, people, we have to say congrats and give some props out to this man. He was just promoted vice president. Michael, would you like to tell us your new role?
Yeah, so it's really just kind of leading the rest of the sales guys, the sales team on how to, really educate clients and continue to do that, because we never want to use fear, uncertainty, and doubt when we kind of present and what we do. That anybody can go look at these reports, but it's on us to take that 3,000-foot view and take all of the articles that we read, all the stories that we hear about, and summarize it for people like you, John, or people that are listening, and explain to them, here's what's going on. Here's the reality of the situation. The facts don't have feelings. And to be able to do that and come in and say you're the expert in the room requires you to do those things. So we're able to train, kind of the different guys that I work with and different employees that here that we, as long as we continue to do that and stay as close to infinity as we can, we're chasing it forever. That as long as we can stay close to it, our clients are going to continue to lean on us as that resource. And so that's kind of the job now.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations, sir. Wonderful on your promotion, and wish you great success in your future. So agenda-wise, one of the things, again, we want to harp on, again, is we are talking about insurance as a safety net. But the reality is this insurance is not a safety net itself. It's a necessity of the financial well-being of your organization. If you're a small business, for example, and you get hit with ransomware, most of you don't know this, but 45% of most small businesses that are hit with ransomware or other cyber-related attacks never open their doors again because they can't afford the downtime. They can't afford to say, it's like, look at Asahi beer in Japan for the last 2 weeks, could not brew one beer over 2 weeks because of a ransomware attack. Think about it at a small business level, saying you're taking $1,500 a month or $1,500 a day in losses, and you rack that up over 30 days. That's almost $45,000 to $50,000 that you've just lost out of your business. So insurance is designed to help provide some financial relief, but it's not a guarantee either, right? So hard truth, Michael, as we kind of jumped on, at the beginning, when we're talking about understanding the hard truth of cyber insurance, I'm a small business. I went out and I got cyber insurance. I paid the premiums I'm supposed to do. I filled out the questionnaire and said, yes, I have security awareness training. Yes, I have multi-factor authentication. Yes, I do all these cool things I'm supposed to do. I update my antivirus. I use managed service providers to get me the reports that I need, and they still get whacked with ransomware. Now, as a carrier or insurance provider, what is the very first thing when someone files a claim? What is the first thing that they do back to the business owner?
So a lot of them, you mentioned a lot of great points in there. There's a lot of things that happen, one, in getting the policies, maintaining the policy. That, hey, you can't just, it's like if you take out a life insurance policy and say, oh, I don't smoke, and then next week you start smoking 2 packs a day, you got to continue that kind of good behavior, we'll call it. So
Right.
you got to make sure that, okay, if we have MFA turned on and we're doing security awareness training, when we sign up for the policy, even after we get the policy, we continue to do those things. Because you're right. People will fill out the application. They're doing all the things. They're working with the wonderful IT staff like John himself. So we continue to do all these things. But then come time of loss, security awareness training was implemented. Nobody ever took it. Or MFA was turned on when we filled out our application. But at the time of the loss, it wasn't. Was that a MSP or John or your IT provider's problem? Was it a client problem because you got tired of it, so you went in and you turned it off? You may have access to do that. I don't know. So there's different things that you've just got to be very careful when you sign up, that you continue to do those best practices. And as long as you do that and your policies are written correctly, they're going to pay out. Now, how much they pay out, that's a different story. But you got to look through your entire policy, because it's never the first 1 or 2 pages. The devil's in the details. You got to look at page 199 of your 200-page policy, because that's where you find the limits on business interruption. That you thought you had $1 million in coverage. Now it's been limited to 250,000 because there's a clause within there that you can't get mad at the insurance company. You didn't read through your policy. So you got to make sure when you're looking at these things and doing these things that it's kind of a group effort. And that's the approach that we've taken at TechRug with it. But you got to make sure that you're working with somebody that understands cyber insurance and what it is. And at the same time, the right managed service provider on how to implement those different things. And the space continues to change, and make sure that you keep up with trends in security and insurance.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that we approach the small business market, so our sweet spot is the SMB, and we approach them on providing managed IT services for them in cybersecurity. And many times they give us the hoe and the hum. Oh my God, it's too expensive. I can't afford it, whatever. But if they have a cyber insurance policy and they think they're going to lean on that, I think what you said, directly is very important to understand. There's always limits of liability. They look at page 199 and go, oh yeah, you do have $1 million, but if you break it down by categories, you may only have $50,000 coverage. And auto insurance works the same way, right? Personal property may only be 50, and injury may be 5,000, right? Now that you may have a policy for 200,000, right, in case of lawsuit, but it gets broken out. Cyber insurance, if I'm correct, is the same way. It breaks it out by different categories. So if you get hit with a specific type of an attack, an example, and you did have incident response, and this response did do what it's supposed to do, but you still got overwhelmed, there's still some limit on how much they're going to pay out to cover your damages.
For sure. And there's always, everyone asks me the golden question that no one should ever give you a straight answer on: what limit do I need then, right? It's, I can't advise. I can tell you where the average claim's at. I can tell you what the average downtime is. I can tell you for your industry, even to get down to more a granular level, and say, okay, people in the construction industry, your claim payout is likely to be X. I can give you all that information, but at the end of the day, John, you have to put your head on your pillow, and your clients have to put their head on their pillow, and everybody that carries cyber has to put their head on their pillow. So if you're comfortable with $1 million, perfect. If you're comfortable at 2, 5, 10, 100, whatever that number may be, that you are comfortable at the end of the day, you understand that, okay, the average claims, $2 million. My policy at $1 million probably doesn't cut it. Maybe I should increase to 2 or 3 or whatever that limit may be. I can help and advise on. But you're exactly right. You might have $1 million in coverage, but your business interruption eats up 750,000 of that. So the other 250,000, you're stuck with the ransomware itself, the cost to maybe notify individuals if you have more compliancy things you got to make sure you're aware of. And notify those individuals. At 250,000, it's gone like that. So you just got to look at the totality of what a claim could cost your business and factor all of that in to taking out a policy.
Absolutely. And it's interesting is that, when you kind of get into the trending, example, number of the smallest businesses, 56% of companies with fewer than 50 employees reported they do have coverage, right? However, what is the primary reason for a lot of these SMBs that have kind of not wanting to get coverage. A lot of it comes down to lack of understanding of coverage. So when you're working with people, as an example, and you're sitting there working with a prospect, and how often do you have to stop and explain to them, this is what really insurance is? Do you find that most get it, or do you find most of them are more like, no, I don't quite get it? How do you handle that education process?
Yeah, and that's a good question, John. Is it normally it starts the conversation with, okay, what is cyber? Why do we need it? We don't really understand it, but we hear it doesn't pay out. And then hopefully by the end of the conversation, it's the complete opposite. So they start the conversation with, oh, we hear about we need to take out cyber insurance. We don't know where to get it. Our broker doesn't understand it, or they got us a policy. We don't feel that comfortable in it. What do we do? Right. And so when I start explaining to them kind of a multifaceted approach to where you've got to have the right security in place, number one. Okay, most policies are going to be available and affordable, at least kind of in our program, but then otherwise, if you have multi-factor, you're doing security awareness training to kind of know what a phishing email may look like or phishing attack may look like, and just be educated on don't click the link, right? So it's from there that you start to then, okay, like I get that. I see where we need kind of these securities in place. But what about the policy itself? Why do I need the cyber, right? I've got John. John's my IT guy. I can go get a cup of coffee. It's that more naiveness that we'll call it, that they haven't had an incident. They've never experienced it. But the ones they hear about on TV or through the news, that's MGM gets hacked. Or you're talking about all these, recently it was a lot of clothing brands that got hacked. So you've got to pay attention to not only them. The only reason you hear about them is because they're large enough to make the news. MGM gets hit, everybody knows about it. The 1 or 2 person law firm, or the 5-person accounting firm, or the 10 patient or 10 doctor's office, they get hit, right?
Small business, the small doctor practices. Yeah, absolutely.
They get hit, you just don't hear about it. They're not large enough to make the news. So what I would advise them to do is a lot like we're all in school. You go through tornado drills and fire drills at least once a quarter, but at least once a year. So we'll call it once a year you go through that event. What we'll do is we'll get with John. I'm going to have him unplug your firewall, today at 8 p.m. By 8 p.m. tomorrow, so we're going into the weekend, we'll talk to John, and you tell me why you need cyber.
Yes.
Let me know how your day goes when he plugs that firewall back in and you can't even access your computer. So, it's from that perspective, then the clients are like, okay, I get it. I understand if we do have an incident, there's something that happens. Human error makes up, about 98, 99% of these claims that we see.
Well, still today, I mean, we deal with a lot of that where we have misconfigurations of firewalls and things that happen as well. Let's talk about the squeeze on the insurance industry. Now, obviously, if we go back 5 years when this became a hot thing and everybody said, okay, you know what, we're going to get cyber insurance and we'll just rely on cyber insurance. Well, the reality, though, is premiums have risen because there's been so many losses, especially with email phishing, business, email compromise, of course, and of course, ransomware attacks. Ransomware attacks, still drive probably the most claims, especially in small business and big business today, especially if somebody's hit more than once in the same year, right? Maybe they stopped the first one, but they didn't stop the second one. And by the time they're in the third one and they decided to say, you know what, we're going to go and pay the ransom just to get our data back. Well, you may not end up having a policy at the end of that, either, right? And the other thing also that I really want to hit on is this statistic here and get your take on it is, coverage is not guaranteed. 42% of companies with cyber insurance reported that the policy only covered a small fraction of the damage. Now, are you the person, let me kind of ask this question in a kind of a fun way. Are you the person of the bearer of bad news? Or do you tell somebody somewhere, hey, send them a letter, tell them they're not covered? How does the bad news get to small business people?
So fortunately, John, in our program, I've been able to, over the last year, be the bearer of good news. So last year in our program, we had 100% claim payout. So every claim that we saw in our program last year was paid out on. Now, the contrary for the rest of the insurance world is you're exactly right. The 41%, I've seen 44%, I've seen kind of around that 50% mark. of those claims either partially pay out or don't pay out at all. So that's a huge problem. And it goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, is you've got to understand your policy. You've got to work with an industry expert on cyber. And if you're not, now we're in the gray area of, okay, I'm paying for this policy. It's costing me $5,000, $10,000 a year. I'm not 100% sure if it's going to cover these types of events. If something happens and there's an outage that may not necessarily be because of the individual that clicked on a link, or John, even if you and your team or their IT service provider had messed up, but more the contingent dependent business interruption is what it's called, where they rely on Microsoft for their tools. They're relying on Google. They rely on all of these different vendors. What happens if they have an outage? Now, how does your policy react and pay out if one of those vendors outside of your control is now impacting your business financially? What do we do?
So we're going to do a public service announcement right here, people, and share it with you. If something happens within your Microsoft 365 tenant, it is your responsibility. Microsoft put this in writing last year, and they did it probably because something happened. But Microsoft itself says within the higher end infrastructure of 365, it's on them. The moment it enters into your tenant, your world, you are responsible. So if there's a ransomware outbreak that has occurred from your host within your tenant that has attacked somebody else, which again is called zombie attacks, that has happened. That will happen. It's on you. It's not on Microsoft. I'm glad, Michael, you brought that up, because many times they think, oh, I'm in the cloud. I'm okay. I'm covered. I'm with Google. Google's got my back. No, they don't. Well, yeah, they do. No, they don't. But the reality, though, is that the moment it's in your tenant, that they parse out from Google Cloud or Microsoft 365, anything from that tenant is on you. And I think that's something when you're thinking about, well, then why do we really need cyber insurance? That would be, to me, number one. Knowing I have to make sure I'm protecting not only my own company, but if my tenant becomes, corrupted or becomes a cyber attack related, how am I going to cover the losses of these businesses that were affected by that? Right. So when you're having that conversation, again, you mentioned how you guys are doing your payouts and everything. When you are talking to that customer and you're starting to have kind of the dialogue a little bit more, when you get into, look, these are the things you have to have. You mentioned multi-factor, you mentioned endpoint, obviously backups, vulnerability patch management, security awareness training. You've already given them the shopping list and said, this is what we're expecting from you. If you don't do this or you don't sustain this, we have the right, to pull the plug, right? My question, though, is that when someone says, we do everything, we have done everything that you told us to do, we use managed services, we got all these things covered, and we still have somebody that clicked on that one email. They clicked on the link that opened up malware, that launched something, and we minimized, we contained the problem, but we still had a problem, right? Is there a time in which that the carriers will say, yes, you did everything we asked you to do. Yes, you did everything with the managed provider. At the end of the day, we still can't honor this claim. Or is it more the opposite way, saying if you do everything you're supposed to have done right, mistakes happen, you're still going to get coverage? How does it kind of play out nowadays?
Right. And that's a good question. That in most cases, if you're truthful, you've got to be honest on these insurance applications. And if you're not doing something, because most people, they want the lowest possible rate. Everyone does. I do. Everybody does. You want the lowest, the best rate that you can get. It's cheaper, right? You want to keep the insurance available and affordable. So you want it to be, one, affordable, but two, you want it to cover as much as you possibly can. So, and we've got to find that balance, that threshold that is the cyber policy. So from that, then when it comes claim time, that now you turn in the claim and you guys are doing everything that you should. We talked about the health insurance and how it, you didn't start smoking 2 packs a day after you filed the application, so you continue to do those things. You continue to operate at a very secure level. Your employees are doing all their security awareness training, multi-factors turn on all the time, everywhere where you can have it. Your odds of the claim being denied diminish very, 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 very small. The odds of the claim not paying out are almost zero. I don't like absolutes, so I'm not going to say it's yes or no, but it's up to the carrier because they're the one paying out the claim. If they deny it for some reason, that's up to them. A lot of the time when I see denials outside of, again, remember our program last year at 100%, but when I hear horror stories from other people that are coming to us, they say, oh, well, we turned in a claim, but they denied it because we had on our application that we had multi-factor. Well, did you consult your IT service provider to confirm that? No, we didn't. We thought it was turned on, or we thought we were doing. these securities through Azure, AWS, these different providers that it turns out we weren't. So it's material misrepresentation. That you're not going to have your claim covered. They can deny. So you got to be careful. But if you're doing the things that you should, you have all the securities in place, you get into this vortex of my claim's going to get paid out, hopefully continue to do those things. Don't change. If there is a change, consult your IT provider, consult the insurance. So when it comes claim time, you don't find out the hard way that, we changed our services through our MSP, that we were working with it in January, we had all these things, but by August we didn't because we changed providers and we forgot to do security awareness training through the new provider. Well, you told us initially that you were doing it. Now you're not. So, claim denied. You got to be very, very, very careful.
Absolutely. So what's interesting is that we talk about, mentioned managed service providers where we come in, or MSP services, right? I mean, our goal with our customers is most importantly, and I think there's a strong correlation between the better that you have a managed services engagement and someone monitoring 24/7 and making sure your backups are done, your patching's being done, your security awareness training's being done, right? Your MFA stays enabled, it's configured properly, is that you have a more likeliness of having your policy paid out. So I think there's a very strong connection between the more you invest in managed services to protect yourself and protect your assets, the more likely your claims are going to be paid out, with the environment. Again, especially if you're constantly having turnover. I mean, a lot of reasons we do SMB work is that a lot of times they don't have full-time IT staff. So they need somebody that's watching everything 24/7. That's when we come in and do the thing that we do as well, right? But what's interesting is that one of the things that we talk about, and I want to get your take on this as well, this goes back into continuously monitoring. Now, you touch on something very important, saying you started being a non-smoker, you became a smoker, you switched to vaping, you got done with vaping because you realized it was disgusting, you went back to smoking, and then you said, I haven't smoked in a month, but reality, though, is you still smoked, right? We find the same thing with clients that are out there, prospects, that say, I don't need monitoring. I think I'm going to be okay, right? But without monitoring 24/7, then when claim time hits, is that a question you guys ask as well? Hey, who's minding the fort? Who is watching the log files? Who's making sure that you are patching correctly? Is that one of the things that comes up as well?
Yeah, and we want to make sure that they're working with a managed service provider, managed security service provider on those different things. We've got to make sure that this is continually being monitored. We're doing stuff. We're following standards, which you and I know very well, and some people in the comments may know that the NIST standards or CMMC or ISO. We're following those standards and we're presenting those standards to every single client. For me, I have to follow Department of Insurance. A lawyer's got to follow the bar. Doctor has to follow AMA guidelines. John's just following and holding all of his clients to NIST 2.0 or CMMC level 3 or whatever it may be. And as long as we continue to do that, and the baseline security that I know we had on a slide there a second ago, that baseline security, call that your 600 credit score right there. But we want to see 700 and 800. Everybody wants 700 and 800 credit score. You want the best possible score that you can get. So having those additional securities that you're talking about, especially on the insurance side, that makes you less likely to have a claim, is going to result in lower premiums. If I've got one person that has multi-factor turned on and they're doing security awareness training, they might be paying $3,000 a year versus the person over here that's down the street doesn't have any of those things. And I'm paying $15,000. Well, wait a minute. Why is mine so much more expensive than yours? And then when they talk, it's like, oh, we're both using the same carrier. What the heck? What's going on? Right. And then you get down to a granular level and it's securities. We got to have the right security in place. Doing additional things above and beyond is going to make you less likely to have a claim. It's going to keep, if you do have a claim, it's going to keep that cost down. Just because we have different securities in place, we have different things that we could do. Again, the likelihood and the severity of claims comes down. Well, guess what? If we're not paying $100 million in claims, and now all of a sudden we're paying $60 million, your insurance premiums stay flat. They don't continue to rise and double and triple like we see a lot of these, other carriers, other providers, and other things that are going on. So definitely got to have a kind of a faceted approach. And I've said a couple times now that is your insurance, your MSP, your IT service provider, and you as the end client all have to work together. If you're not, you're working against each other, and it's just going to continue to be a wildfire that makes up cyber and cyber insurance.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that we bring up is we make suggestions and recommendations all the time. Now, one of the latest things that we are really dialed in and focusing on is working with our clients and doing what we call third-party pen testing or penetration testing, so they can have an idea of, as they're going through the cyber insurance application process, we come in and offer pen testing services as a way of evaluating current controls. So the things that we're looking for, to your point, how do you lower your insurance premiums? Well, if the pen test shows that you have MFA working, you have patches and remediation, you have endpoint security working properly, your firewalls are configured properly, you couldn't get to the actual digital assets through a pen testing, having the ability to report this to the insurance provider and say, hey, here's what we've done. We just did a risk assessment. We just did a pen testing from a third party. Here's all the goodness that we found. We do have a few corrections to make, but it does show this that we're in very good standing, right? The other thing also, more importantly, is that it also, by doing pen testing, and again, we advocate this to a lot of our clients, is this really demonstrates to the insurance carrier like yourself that you're taking more of a proactive approach. You just mentioned working together, right? It's interesting how so many people are still in reactionary mode. We have clients that say, well, I haven't been hit yet, so until I do, I may have to hold off for a little while. But the moment they go to file a claim and they don't have any of this proactiveness working for them, then they either, to your point, higher premiums, lesser payout, may not even get a renewal, either as well. And I think the other thing also, you look at the bottom point here, is improves coverage terms. If somebody has proven to be proactive in their security, they're doing all the right things to try to stay ahead of a problem, they react very well, their systems are working, they have 24/7 monitoring going on. You as an insurance carrier say, hey, you know what? We may not charge you as much premium because you're proving that as well. How often does it make you feel good to go to somebody and say, guess what? I'm going to lower your premiums because you've done all the things that are expected to do. Does that happen quite often as well?
Everyone loves it. When you come in and you're the good guy, and it's any scenario that you come in and you can say, hey, because of where your IT service provider has you in terms of your security and all the things that you guys are doing, here's your policy premium that's $2,000 less than what it normally would be because you have all the right security in place. Or the rest of the market, I can tell you, is at X, we're at Y because of all these additional securities and things that you have. So people are very happy to hear that news. And especially come renewal time when they're seeing, oh, premiums are going up, premiums are going up, premiums are going up. And I ask, because for us, the space is constantly changing and the insurance has to adapt. So we've got to ask additional questions. So if that's implementing things like privileged access management tools or lapse solutions, kind of that rotation of passwords, that we do those things because that's an area we saw claims. So let's ask the clients to implement those things. What does it cost? Can it offset that? What would be an increase? So instead of going from 2,000 to 6,000, they go from 2 to 3, maybe a little increase just year to year because of claims, but it can still offset and mitigate that financial toll that takes on the business. And then they don't get into the, why do I pay for it? It's too expensive. And we can address that as it comes up. And again, like you said, be proactive and not have to want to take out insurance after you have a claim, because in premiums that are like, whoa, wait a minute. Now they're all the way through the roof. We got to take it out before it happens. Let's take it out before the house burns down, not after.
Exactly. No, I love that analogy because it's funny how people wait for something and then they run for insurance. It's like, what do you expect, man? You're going to pay, of course, 15,000 or whatever, right? But having it proactively ahead of time, you may be paying 3. Right. So, that's a beautiful analogy you just gave there. I really like that. So let's talk about next steps. So what really is the call to action here? Again, as our customers, we really encourage, number one, is that, if you're interested or you're currently in cyber insurance, you're looking at a renewal, or you're looking at potentially having to just overcome a claim that you just went through and you don't want to go through it again. This is where engaging with us at, Coeus Consulting is about having us come in and do not only kind of a pen testing environment, but having the conversation on, let's take a look at what you have running today. What's your MFA? What is your firewalls? What's your overall infrastructure look like as well? That's kind of where we come into in action as well. Now, the other thing also that's kind of really, I guess, really important, kind of the end of the story is, it does take, as you mentioned, a little bit of a village here. It takes having an insurance carrier, it takes having an MSSP, but it also takes a commitment by the business to say, okay, let's have a good headspace on why we're doing this insurance. We're trying to lower our risk liability, but we just don't assume that we're going to get paid out. But we do have to make the investments in having our stuff being monitored, having stuff being configured properly as well. Anything else, Michael, kind of in closing, that you want to kind of mention to people on this is why, at the end of the day, why are you promoting insurance the way you do?
Yeah, it's for me, I want to protect people's businesses, whether you're a law firm, a manufacturer, whatever it is that you do. And the reason I get out of bed and I enjoy what I do is I get to protect that business from an area of insurance that isn't regulated. It isn't, well taught to a lot of local agents. I was a local agent for a number of years. I didn't understand cyber at all. That now over the last 5 years, I have really learned, hey, there's this whole universe out here that people don't know about. We've got to learn and educate and continue to be that, you're chasing infinity with cyber, but if we can be 2 steps behind it or even a step behind it, and I can educate John and John's clients on what to look out for, what we see, what we hear about, what can we do to adapt as the insurance company to make sure that, you guys are crossing all your T's and dotting your I's to make sure that the policies continue to pay out. I know for 2025, now we still got 2 months, but for 2025, we've had another year of 100% claim representation because our clients are doing what we're looking for in terms of securities, and they're doing the right things. Human error makes up 99% of the claims that happen. So we want to cover you in that scenario. That's why going through these, and sometimes you come in as a voice of reason and say, we got to take out the right securities, man. You're not doing X, Y, and Z, but you want me to give you the $2 million loan. I'm not going to do it. If you do, then I can get the loan out to you. I get the policy out to you, and we can continue to protect your business. And that we have done so well and continue to do so well in great partnerships like we have with you, John, and with your, with your end clients. So just in closing, be very educated on what to look for. If you're not, talk to a cyber specific provider, insurer, broker, whoever that may be, that's all they do. You got a heart problem, right? Or a cyber problem. You're not going to go to your general practitioner. You're going to a cardiologist in this space. And, for us, we have been that cardiologist for a lot of our clients across here now in the U.S. and internationally. We've got offices all over the world. So if we can continue to do that and educate, I will be sitting right here.
I love it. So, Mike, if someone is interested in talking to you directly about cyber insurance, I know I've had a pleasure to get to know you as well. I believe you're the carrier for our company. So obviously, thank you very much for all the things you do for our boss. But how can people best get hold of you? What's the best way to get hold of you and kind of have that conversation?
Yeah, reach out. Email is probably, unless I'm doing something like this and I'm on the phone, that email is probably the best way to get a hold of me. And it's, just Michael S. at techrug.com. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. We're all over social media. So, look us up, just at TechRug, search it on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We're all over the place, but send me an email. I don't have to, I just want to educate. It doesn't even have to write your policy. There's no obligation. Just point out, hey, here are some areas that you're missing. Maybe we can save you some money at the same time. How often do you get to say you charge us less and include more? So hopefully something we can do for some people here that are listening today. But I appreciate you having me, John.
Oh, no, Michael, thank you for making time for us as well. And I got to tell you, it's a pleasure to know you. Very informative. You filled in all the gaps in my head. To be honest with you, I've wanted to ask these cyber questions for years on insurance. You've answered it well. I really appreciate you, Michael. And thank you for making time for today.
Thank you as well.
Guys, thank you very much for making on this week's podcast on Cybersecurity Awareness Month here at Coeus Consulting. Next week, we'll have another podcast as well. Hope everyone have a very, very safe weekend. And for those of us here in the Tucson and Phoenix area, we're expecting more rain this weekend. So everyone stay dry and stay safe, and everyone be well. Take care. Thanks.